In the cold, endless dark of the galaxy, there existed a world forged by conflict, a planet where strength was not only valued, but worshipped. This was Planet Vegeta, home of the Saiyan race. A crimson sphere orbiting a dying sun, it was both majestic and merciless, a fitting cradle for people born to fight. From the moment a Saiyan drew their first breath, their destiny was sealed in combat. Power defined worth, and worth defined survival. Weakness had no place here. Every child was measured, scanned, and categorized according to their potential. The strong were celebrated. The weak were forgotten. Among those forgotten was a child whose scouter reading barely flickered. His name, Bardock. Bardock entered life not as a prince or prodigy, but as a low-class warrior, a soldier meant to serve, not lead. Yet in his veins ran the same restless flame that burned within every Saiyan, an unyielding hunger to grow stronger. As a boy, he was relentless. He trained alone, bruised and broken, rising each time with a fiercer resolve. He understood early that power was not a gift. It was something you carved out of pain. Saiyan society offered little warmth. Bonds were rare. Compassion, rarer still. Even family ties were often secondary to the pursuit of strength. But within this harsh existence, Bardock found purpose. He became a soldier not for glory or empire, but because war was the only truth he knew. His battles were his identity, his victories, his voice. When Bardock reached adulthood, the Saiyan race had already fallen under the control of Frieza's empire. The mighty Frieza Force, a galactic army ruled by the cold hand of a tyrant, had subjugated countless worlds. The Saiyans were both weapon and tool, their ferocity harnessed to conquer planets in Frieza's name. In return, they were granted spoils, territories, technology, and a semblance of freedom. It was a devil's bargain, and Bardock accepted it like all the rest. Fighting was his purpose. Questioning orders was not. As the years passed, Bardock distinguished himself not through status, but through sheer efficiency. On distant worlds consumed by war, his name became whispered among survivors and soldiers alike. He was the ghost that arrived with fire and left only ashes. Yet within his squad, Bardock was more than a killer. He was a leader. His team, Tora, Fasha, Shugesh, and Borgos, were not elite, but together they were unstoppable. Each mission forged their bond deeper, their trust built through bloodshed and survival. They laughed between battles, taunted each other, and shared meals beneath alien skies. For Saiyans, that was family. Bardock, without admitting it, cherished them. But even in victory, a quiet unease grew within him. He noticed things the others ignored. Frieza's army was watching them more closely. The missions were becoming more dangerous, more suicidal. Bardock saw patterns, assignments that seemed designed to wear down the Saiyans, to test them, to measure their limits. And though he didn't yet know it, this observation would one day become his curse. Still, he pushed aside doubt. When a Saiyan had strength, they fought. That was the way. And Bardock was strong. He wore his scars like medals, his armor scuffed from countless campaigns. In every battle, he felt alive. Until one day, amid the chaos of conquest, something changed. It was a mission to a world named Kanasa. The planet's inhabitants were said to possess strange psychic powers, abilities to see through time itself. For Frieza, that was a threat. For Bardock, it was simply another mission. He and his squad descended upon Kanasa like a storm, burning through resistance with ruthless precision. The Saiyans fought for days under silver skies, each explosion illuminating their feral grins. In the end, Kanassa fell. The battle was won, or so they thought. That night, as Bardock surveyed the ruins, a wounded Kanassan warrior staggered toward him. Broken, bleeding, yet defiant, the alien looked into Bardock's eyes and spoke words that would haunt him forever. He said that Bardock would see the future, that he would see the end of his people. Before Bardock could strike him down, the warrior touched his forehead, and a searing light consumed his vision. For a moment, time itself shattered. In that instant, Bardock saw it all. He saw Planet Vegeta, engulfed in flame. He saw Frieza's face, twisted in cruel amusement. He saw his comrades die, and his people vanish beneath a cataclysmic blast. And above all, he saw a child, a crying infant launched into the stars. The vision faded, but the terror remained. When Bardock awoke, he was trembling. His comrades thought it was battle fatigue, but Bardock knew better. The images burned in his mind, too vivid to dismiss. He tried to shake it off, to laugh it away as nonsense. But deep inside, a seed of dread had been planted. From that day, Bardock began to change. He no longer fought merely for conquest. Each battle felt heavier, each victory emptier. He started asking questions no Saiyan dared ask. Why did Frieza need them? Why did he keep them alive when they could one day surpass him? Why did he fear them? The answers were there, hidden beneath the arrogance of their empire. Frieza's rule depended on control, and the Saiyans, proud, ruthless, powerful, were the one species that could threaten it. Bardock began to suspect the unthinkable, that Frieza was preparing to destroy them. But suspicions were dangerous. Even his own squad dismissed his warnings as paranoia. Saiyans didn't fear death, and they certainly didn't fear Frieza. Yet Bardock couldn't shake the feeling that his vision wasn't a curse, but a warning. He continued to fight, but every world burned differently now. Every scream echoed louder. He saw ghosts of what was coming, the destruction he had glimpsed. His instincts screamed to act, to stop what was inevitable. But how could one low-class warrior defy the ruler of the universe? Back on Planet Vegeta, life continued as normal. The Saiyans trained, fought, and celebrated their power, blind to the storm gathering above them. The royal palace gleamed beneath the sun, the banners of King Vegeta fluttering proudly in the wind. Yet in orbit, Frieza's massive ship lingered like a vulture, its shadow stretching across the red horizon. Inside, the tyrant watched, amused, calculating. Frieza had heard whispers too, rumors of a Super Saiyan, a warrior of legend destined to rise among the Saiyans and challenge his rule. For Frieza, such legends were intolerable. Power, after all, belonged only to him. And so, while Bardock wrestled with his visions, the gears of fate turned quietly toward extinction. As the chapter of Bardock's early life closes, the pieces are set in motion. A soldier born to fight, a leader bound by loyalty, and a father destined never to see his son grow. He does not yet know that the infant he barely remembers will one day stand before Frieza as his equal, and that through his blood, his will, and his final act of defiance, the legacy of a forgotten warrior will echo across generations. Bardock's story had only begun, but destiny was already watching. Among the countless planets conquered by Saiyans, few ever remembered the names of the soldiers who brought their worlds to ruin. But within the ranks of Frieza's army, there existed one unit whose efficiency bordered on legend. A team led by a low-class warrior named Bardock. The squad was not elite by title, but their results spoke louder than any noble bloodline. 5 warriors moved as one. Bardock, their commander. Tora, his right hand and voice of reason. Fasha, sharp and fearless. Shugesh, massive and loyal. And Borgos, quiet yet unbreakable. Together they formed the spearhead of countless planetary invasions, taking worlds in Frieza's name without hesitation or mercy. To outsiders they were savages, an unstoppable wave of destruction. But among themselves they were something more. Comrades bound not by duty, but by trust, earned in the fire of 1,000 battles. In a race that valued strength over sentiment, that bond was rare. And it was what made Bardock's team so different. Their missions often began the same way. The cold hum of their pods, the metallic hiss of atmosphere as they landed on alien soil, the distant roar of armies who still believed they could resist. Bardock would emerge first, scouter flickering, scanning the battlefield. He'd grunt an order, and within minutes, the sky would burn. They were efficient, precise, almost ritualistic in their destruction. Between missions, when the blood dried and the silence returned, they would rest. Fasha would joke about the next planet's bounty. Shugesh would boast about his kills. Borgos would listen in silence while Tora argued strategy with Bardock. For fleeting moments, they were almost human. It was during those rare interludes that Bardock's hardened facade would crack, just slightly. He'd allow himself to smile, to breathe, to feel like more than a weapon. But even then, the shadows of his vision clung to him. Since Kanasa, his nights had become restless. Dreams blurred into flashes of fire, screams, and the cold laughter of Frieza. Each time he woke, drenched in sweat, the same thought haunted him. It wasn't just a dream. It was prophecy. Still, Bardock told no one. A Saiyan who doubted was a Saiyan who weakened, and weakness invited death. So he buried the truth beneath his scars and pressed on. Yet, no matter how many worlds they conquered, he couldn't escape the sense that every victory was hollow, that every planet raised was another step toward the end he had seen. The squad noticed his change. He was quieter now, more distant. When Tora asked what was wrong, Bardock brushed it off with the same cold confidence as always. Just tired, he'd say. But Tora knew better. You couldn't fight beside someone that long and not see the cracks forming beneath the surface. Weeks passed. The team's reputation grew. Frieza's lieutenants, Zarbon, Dodoria, began to take interest. They praised Bardock's efficiency, even as they quietly resented the pride of a Saiyan warrior who refused to kneel. It was during one of these brief commendations that Bardock caught something in Zarbon's tone, a flicker of disdain, a trace of condescension, the kind that spoke not of superiority, but of fear disguised as arrogance. He didn't know it yet, but Frieza's patience with the Saiyans was thinning. Their power was rising too fast, their ambition too strong, and their loyalty too fragile. On their next mission, the squad was dispatched to a remote system, a world with little resistance, easy spoils. But something felt wrong the moment they arrived. The enemy was weak, disorganized, almost too easy. When the fighting ended, Bardock stood among the bodies, his armor stained in ash and blood, and an uneasy silence filled the air. He raised his scouter, checking for life readings, but instead it caught a faint power signature behind him. He turned, too late. A blinding flash, a roar, and then nothing. When Bardock awoke, the world was spinning. Smoke filled the sky, and his teammates lay scattered across the ground. Tora, Fasha, Shugesh, Borgos, all down. His chest burned, his body broken. Above him, through the haze, he saw them. Dodoria's elite squad, laughing, watching the massacre they had orchestrated. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Dodoria had been sent by Frieza. The orders were simple. Eliminate Bardock's unit. They had grown too proud, too independent, too dangerous. The Saiyans were no longer tools to be used. They were threats to be erased. Bardock could barely move. His scouter cracked, his armor shattered. Tora, barely clinging to life, reached out to him. There were no words of comfort, only a grim truth shared between warriors who knew their fate. With his last breath, Tora whispered the one thing Bardock already feared. Frieza did this. And then he was gone. Bardock's world fell silent. In that silence, grief gave way to rage. Pure, unfiltered, cosmic rage. He screamed, not out of pain, but defiance. The sky seemed to tremble with his fury. For the first time, the vision and the present merged. The destruction he had foreseen was no longer distant. It had begun. Staggering to his feet, he looked around at the bodies of his fallen comrades. These were not just soldiers. They were his family. And Frieza had taken them from him, just as he planned, to take everything from their race. In that moment, Bardock's purpose crystallized. He was done serving tyrants, done following orders. The war that had defined his life had finally turned inward, and now it was personal. He commandeered a Frieza Force ship and set course for Planet Vegeta. His body was battered, his armor torn, but his resolve was absolute. Each heartbeat pounded with one thought: warn them. Warn the Saiyans. Stop Frieza before it's too late. But deep down, he already knew what he'd find. As he entered Planet Vegeta's orbit, the familiar red skies stretched before him, calm and deceiving. The city lights shimmered across the surface like embers. A world oblivious to the fire about to consume it. Bardock landed hard, stumbling out of the ship. The guards at the docking bay looked up, startled by his condition. But before they could speak, Bardock's voice cut through the air, sharp and raw. "They're coming." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. To them, he was raving, another soldier broken by battle. Frieza destroy the Saiyans? Impossible. They laughed it off. Frieza needed them, they said. He would never destroy his own army. But Bardock had seen it. He had lived it. The future wasn't a dream. It was prophecy written in blood. He pushed past them, limping through the streets toward the royal palace. Everywhere he looked, he saw ignorance. Soldiers laughing, children training, the marketplace alive with noise and pride. None of them knew. None of them saw the shadow above them. In the palace, he demanded an audience with King Vegeta, but his words never reached the throne. The guards dismissed him as delusional, dragging him out before he could speak. To them, Bardock was a low-class warrior, insignificant. Who would listen to a soldier's warning about gods and tyrants? But Bardock didn't need an army. He didn't need a king. He needed only his will. That night, as the twin moons of Planet Vegeta rose, Bardock stood alone on a rocky cliff overlooking the capital. His body trembled from exhaustion. His armor cracked from battle. But his eyes burned with the clarity of a man who had nothing left to lose. Somewhere beyond the stars, he knew Frieza was watching, preparing to erase an entire race with the flick of his finger. The Saiyans laughed in their arrogance. But Bardock saw the truth. They were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. And so, as dawn approached, a single warrior prepared to face the inevitable alone. Not for glory, not for vengeance, but because someone had to stand against destiny, even if no one believed him. The blood of his squad, the weight of his visions, and the fury of his heart fused into one purpose. Bardock would fight. He would defy the stars themselves if he had to. Because even in a world where strength was everything, courage still mattered. The capital of Planet Vegeta lay beneath a blood-red sky, silent and unaware of the doom hovering above it. Bardock moved through the city like a shadow, bruised, limping, and driven by a truth no one wanted to hear. Around him, life went on as it always had. Saiyan soldiers boasted about their victories. Traders shouted across the markets, and elites discussed their next missions with casual arrogance. To them, everything was as it should be. To Bardock, it was the calm before extinction. He wandered through the streets, trying to convince anyone who would listen. But his words fell like stones into a void. The Saiyans didn't believe in prophecy. They believed in fists, in power, in pride. And what Bardock spoke of sounded like fear. Something no Saiyan would ever admit to. Even those who respected him avoided his gaze. A few whispered behind his back. They said he had gone mad after losing his squad, that grief had broken his mind. But Bardock's clarity had never been sharper. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of what was coming. Frieza's smirk, the planet burning, the screams of his people. The images came without mercy, like a curse carved into his soul. He could no longer tell whether they were visions of the future or the final fragments of his sanity. But it didn't matter. He knew the truth, and that was enough. He stopped by the medical center to retrieve his scouter and armor. The technicians looked at him with pity, unaware that they were repairing the gear of a man fighting ghosts. Bardock watched the red glow of his scouter blink to life and felt a strange calm settle over him. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was proof that he still had a purpose. Outside, the air was thick with energy. Ships came and went. Soldiers trained. Engines roared. The sounds of a warrior world alive and thriving. Yet in the distance above the atmosphere, he could feel the presence of Frieza's fleet. A faint hum of power that sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't imagination. The Emperor's ship had been orbiting Planet Vegeta for days now, under the guise of routine inspection. But Bardock knew inspections didn't require armadas. The truth was hiding in plain sight. As night fell, he made his way to the outskirts of the city, the training fields where the low-class warriors gathered. These were the ones like him, born with little potential, fighting for scraps of recognition. He stood before them, still wearing the blood-stained armor of his last battle, and spoke with the conviction of a man who had seen the future. Frieza is going to destroy us. The murmurs started instantly. Some laughed. Others stared, unsure if he was serious. Bardock continued, his voice rough but unwavering. He told them about Kanasa, about the vision, about the betrayal of his squad. He described Frieza's fear of the Saiyan race, how the Emperor's empire was built on control, and how legends of a Super Saiyan had already begun to spread fear through his ranks. Frieza wouldn't wait for prophecy to come true. He would erase it. For a brief moment, the crowd was silent. Some of them believed him. You could see it in their eyes, the flicker of doubt, the question they didn't dare ask. But Saiyan pride was stronger than fear. One by one they shook their heads. "You've lost it," someone muttered. "Frieza needs us," said another. You're just scared. Scared. The word echoed in Bardock's mind like an insult. But deep down, he knew they weren't mocking him. They were lying to themselves. Because if they believed him, even for a second, it would mean facing a truth too terrifying to accept. That everything they had built, every victory they had fought for, was about to vanish in an instant. He left the training grounds without another word. There was no time to argue. He could no longer save them as a people. All he could do now was fight as one man. That night, Bardock wandered through the sleeping city. The wind carried the smell of dust and metal, the faint hum of ships ready for launch. He looked up at the stars, searching for the faint glint of Frieza's ship. There it was, distant, glimmering, watching. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, the cold promise of death waiting in the void. He clenched his fists. If no one else would act, he would. He couldn't stop the future, but he could face it head on. That was what it meant to be a Saiyan. In the royal palace, King Vegeta sat upon his throne, unaware of the storm approaching. Reports had reached him, whispers of Frieza's growing mistrust, the concentration of forces around Planet Vegeta. Even he had begun to suspect betrayal. But politics bound his hands. A king who acted rashly invited rebellion from within, and Frieza's spies were everywhere. So he waited, as kings often do, hoping strength and pride would be enough to protect his people. But strength meant nothing to a god who ruled from the stars. Elsewhere, in the distant reaches of space, aboard his massive ship, Frieza smiled. His scouter flickered with readings of thousands of Saiyan power levels below. They were getting stronger, faster than expected. Even the children showed potential that disturbed him. The legend of the Super Saiyan, once dismissed as myth, now felt like a whisper of inevitability. And Frieza was not a man who waited for inevitability. His decision was simple. Erase them, he murmured to his subordinates. All of them. Back on Planet Vegeta, Bardock's instincts screamed. He could feel the shift in the air, the tremor in his bones. Something was coming. He raced through the empty streets toward his pod, every step echoing like thunder in the stillness. He didn't know if he was running to save his people or to meet his fate, but the difference no longer mattered. As he reached the launch bay, the sky began to glow. The horizon shimmered in unnatural light. Soldiers looked up in confusion, their laughter fading as the heavens turned crimson. Bardock stopped, breathless, staring upward. There it was, Frieza's ship, descending like a dark star, its silhouette blotting out the sun. For a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Then the alarms began to sound. Panic rippled through the city as the realization spread. This was no inspection. The fleet above them was fully armed, its energy signatures spiking to impossible levels. Bardock's heart pounded in his chest, each beat like a war drum. The future had arrived. He sprinted to his pod, overriding the safety systems. His plan was madness, but so was doing nothing. If Frieza was going to destroy his people, then Bardock would be the one to face him, alone if necessary. The pod doors sealed. The engines roared. The ground fell away beneath him as he shot into the stars. Through the window, Planet Vegeta grew smaller, its glow fading into the darkness. Ahead, Frieza's fleet shimmered, a wall of death waiting for him. Bardock stared straight at it, his mind filled with the voices of his fallen comrades. Tora, Fasha, Borgos, Shugesh. They had all died for this. He would not die in silence. He reached for the scouter controls, scanning the massive ship before him. Thousands of power readings filled the display. Soldiers, officers, commanders. But none of them mattered. Bardock wasn't here for them. He was here for one being, Frieza. And as the tyrant's ship loomed larger, Bardock finally understood the true meaning of his visions. The future was not something to fear. It was something to confront. Destiny wasn't written by gods or emperors. It was forged by those willing to defy them. He tightened his fists and whispered to himself, his voice steady and cold. "This ends with me." As the pod sped toward the fleet, the stars stretched into streaks of light. The moment had come. The final rebellion of a forgotten warrior against the greatest power in the universe. Planet Vegeta's fate was sealed, but Bardock's fight was far from over. Because even in the face of certain death, a Saiyan spirit never dies. The universe has a strange way of delivering fate. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it screams. For Bardock, fate came in the form of a curse, one that would change not only his destiny, but the destiny of his entire race. The Saiyan warrior who had known only conquest and blood would now come face to face with something far more terrifying than any enemy, the truth. It began on a nameless world at the far edge of Frieza's domain, a planet called Kanasa. It was small, quiet, and rich in psychic energy. The Kanasans were not known for brute strength, but for something far greater, their minds. They could sense what others could not. They could glimpse into time itself. And when the Saiyans came, they fought not just for survival, but to protect that secret. Bardock and his squad landed under a crimson sky. To them, it was just another mission, another world to purge in Frieza's name, another battle to remind the universe of Saiyan dominance. The Kanasans resisted fiercely, unleashing waves of energy that shimmered like firelight, but they were no match for the raw brutality of Saiyan power. Bardock led the charge with his usual precision. Efficient, merciless, unstoppable. Within hours, the planet burned. By dawn, the Kanasans lay defeated. Bardock stood among the ruins, his armor cracked, his blood mixing with the dust of war. The battle was won. Yet, among the dying survivors, one Kanasan still moved. A figure barely alive, eyes glowing faintly with psychic light. As Bardock approached to finish the job, the Kanasan raised a trembling hand and spoke words that would echo in Bardock's mind forever. He cursed him, not with pain or death, but with vision. A vision of what was to come. The Kanasan told him that soon his people would fall, that their proud race would burn under the light of betrayal, that even the strongest among them would be erased. And as Bardock struck him down, a pulse of energy surged through his mind. The gift, or the curse, of foresight took hold. In an instant, Bardock saw flashes of the future. Not clear images, but fragments of something catastrophic. Flames. The sky filled with light. The face of Frieza smiling coldly. The entire planet Vegeta engulfed in destruction. He saw himself reaching for something, someone. But it all vanished in a blaze of white. Bardock fell to his knees, clutching his head, his mind spinning between the present and what was to come. The visions cut deep, showing him things his warrior's heart could not comprehend. When Bardock awoke, his squad was gone, continuing their work on another planet. He returned to them later, bruised and dazed, but he said nothing of the curse. Not yet. He didn't want to believe it. Saiyans didn't believe in prophecies. They believed in strength. But the images haunted him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Planet Vegeta destroyed. Every time he looked into the stars, he felt something pulling at his chest. A quiet voice whispering the time was running out. Days passed, and the visions grew stronger. He began to see clearer glimpses. Frieza's massive ship hovering above Planet Vegeta, energy gathering at its center, and the terrified faces of his people looking to the sky. It was a future drenched in despair. Bardock knew what it meant. Frieza was planning something, and if the visions were real, there would be no escape. He tried to ignore it. He tried to convince himself that it was madness. An after effect of the Kanassan's final attack. But deep down, the instincts that had kept him alive for so long told him otherwise. Bardock was a fighter, but he was also a survivor. He knew when to trust his gut. And his gut screamed that everything was about to change. On their next mission, he fought harder than usual. He fought with desperation, as if every battle could be his last. His teammates noticed. They laughed at first, teasing him for being too serious. But Bardock couldn't shake the weight of the visions. He began to see glimpses even during battle, not of his enemies, but of the people he cared for, his comrades, his mate, Jean, his newborn son, Kakarot. Images flickered before him. A small child crying, a distant planet, a beam of light traveling through space. He didn't understand what it meant, but he felt it deep in his bones. He needed to protect them. Soon, the visions became too real to ignore. On the battlefield, he saw his friends being cut down, not by alien warriors, but by Frieza's own soldiers. He saw Tora fall. He saw Fasha's armor shattered, and every time he blinked, the image grew clearer. It was no longer a distant dream. It was a prophecy unfolding before his eyes. Bardock began asking questions, but none of the Saiyans dared speak against Frieza. To them, he was untouchable, the ruler of the stars, the being who had turned their warrior race into an army of conquerors. No one suspected betrayal, but Bardock knew. He had seen Frieza's cold smirk in his visions, that quiet satisfaction of a predator watching its prey, too blind to notice the trap. As he returned to Planet Vegeta, Bardock felt a tension in the air. The sky seemed darker, the atmosphere heavier. The other Saiyans, unaware of what was coming, trained, laughed, and prepared for new missions. But Bardock could barely sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same image. Frieza's ship, a ball of energy forming at its core, and then silence. He began to wonder why Frieza had kept them all on standby, why the missions had suddenly slowed down, why scouts whispered of troops being recalled from the outer worlds. Frieza was gathering his forces, and the Saiyans were being drawn closer to home, like flies to a web. Bardock's unease turned into dread. One night, as he looked at the sky above Planet Vegeta, the vision struck again, stronger than ever before. He saw it in perfect clarity. Frieza's ship, the glow of the death ball, the planet crumbling under the explosion, the souls of millions of Saiyans vanishing in an instant. And in the midst of it all, Bardock saw a pod. Small, metallic, cutting through the darkness of space. Inside it, a baby, his son, Kakarot. The image lingered, pure and silent, before fading into nothingness. That was when Bardock finally understood. The curse of foresight was not punishment. It was warning, a desperate message from fate itself. And now, it was up to him to act. For the first time in his life, Bardock felt fear, not for himself, but for his people. He realized that strength alone wouldn't save them. The Saiyans had become too comfortable under Frieza's control, too blind to see the chains tightening around their necks. He tried to tell others. He warned his fellow warriors, but they only laughed. They called him paranoid. They said Frieza would never turn on his most valuable soldiers. They didn't understand. They couldn't. Bardock saw the truth in his visions, and he knew what was coming. He could feel it every time he breathed the air of his dying world. And so, the warrior who had lived for battle began to fight for something else: survival. He made one decision that would define his legacy forever. If no one else would stand against Frieza, he would, even if it cost him everything. The curse of foresight had become the fire that would guide him toward destiny. The Kanassan's dying words echoed in his mind, that one man can change the course of history. Bardock didn't yet know what that meant, but deep down, he began to believe it. In the dark of night, under the distant stars, a low-class Saiyan looked to the heavens and felt the first tremors of rebellion. He was no longer a soldier following orders. He was a father, a leader, a man who had seen the end of all things. And as the visions continued to haunt him, Bardock's resolve hardened. The time for silence was over. The time for action had begun. What began as a curse had become his greatest weapon. The visions had shown him death, but they had also given him purpose. He would not run from fate. He would confront it head-on, no matter how hopeless the battle seemed. Because that was what it meant to be a Saiyan. And for Bardock, there was no greater honor than fighting for the truth, even if it meant standing alone. The silence before destruction is always the loudest. For Bardock, that silence had become unbearable. He had seen the future, the fire, the ash, the destruction of his people. And now, every heartbeat echoed with the certainty of what was to come. Planet Vegeta was doomed, and no one wanted to listen. When Bardock returned from his missions, he expected chaos, preparation, resistance, anything. Instead, he found the Saiyan capital alive with false confidence, warriors trained in the courtyards, laughing and boasting about future conquests. The streets were crowded with soldiers bragging about missions they would never live to see. The Empire's flags fluttered against a calm red sky. It was as if the planet itself didn't know it was standing on the edge of extinction. Bardock walked through them like a ghost. He tried to speak to the commanders, to the elites, to anyone who might listen. He told them about Frieza's gathering fleets, about the unnatural calm in the outer systems, about his visions, but they dismissed him with laughter. To them, Bardock was a low-class fighter, a soldier who had seen too many battles and lost too much blood. They called him paranoid, delusional, a warrior who had spent too long among the corpses of his enemies. But Bardock knew. He felt it. The air was too still. The stars above seemed too quiet. It was the calm that came before the storm. Each day that passed, Bardock's visions sharpened. He could see the moment Frieza's hand rose to command the end. He could feel the searing light of that death ball in his chest. He could almost hear the screams of his people fading into nothingness. The curse of foresight had become a mirror, showing him what none would believe. And so, Bardock did the only thing left to do. He prepared for the inevitable. He returned to his home, a small, unremarkable dwelling at the outskirts of the city. There, Geen waited. She was one of the few Saiyans who had stepped away from the life of a fighter, tending instead to the food distribution center. She was gentle by Saiyan standards. And in her calm eyes, Bardock saw the only peace he had ever known. He didn't tell her everything. He didn't need to. She saw it in his face, in the weight he carried in silence. She had always trusted his instincts, and when he spoke of danger, she believed him. They both knew Frieza was capable of anything, and though she feared the truth, she did not question it. Their son, Kakarot, had already been sent away, a newborn cast into the stars, a small pod streaking through the void toward a distant blue planet called Earth. Bardock told himself it was only for training, that Kakarot would grow stronger away from the war. But deep down, he knew why he had done it. He had seen it in his visions, that tiny pod escaping destruction. It was the only image of hope he had left. As the days drew shorter, the signs of doom became impossible to ignore. Frieza's fleet had begun to surround Planet Vegeta's orbit. Massive battleships floated above like silent vultures. Their lights cut across the red sky like cold stars, watching, waiting. Yet even then, the Saiyans below celebrated. Some thought Frieza was preparing them for a grand campaign. Others believed it was a show of strength, a reminder of their place in his empire. But Bardock knew better. He knew a slaughter when he saw one. And then it began. One by one, reports came in. Saiyan squads returning from missions were ambushed by Frieza's forces. Some never returned at all. Bardock's own team was among them. His closest friends, Tora, Fasha, Shugesh, Borgos, the squad that had fought beside him for years, were wiped out in a sudden attack. No warning, no mercy. Bardock arrived too late, finding only the aftermath, a wasteland littered with familiar armor and shattered scouters. His chest burned with rage and grief. The visions had not lied. This was the beginning of the end. Something inside him broke that day. Bardock, the soldier who had once lived for battle, no longer fought for conquest. He fought for revenge. He swore that Frieza would pay. Not because he could win, but because someone had to try. He carried his fallen comrades back toward the city, their blood marking the ground beneath him. The Saiyans who saw him pass looked away. They did not understand. They still didn't believe the truth. But Bardock's eyes, fierce, unyielding, told a story words could not. The rebellion had begun, and it was his alone to fight. He gathered what little he could, his armor, his scouter, his power, and his will. There were no armies to command, no legions to lead, just one Saiyan standing against an empire. Yet in that moment, Bardock didn't care about odds. The visions had shown him death, yes, but they had also shown him choice. He could die begging, or he could die fighting. He chose the latter. Bardock soared into the skies above Planet Vegeta, his aura blazing like a red flame against the dark clouds. He headed straight toward Frieza's fleet. Below him, the city gleamed in ignorance, unaware that its final sunrise was unfolding. As he flew, the memories of his comrades flashed in his mind. Tora's laughter, Fasha's courage, Gein's quiet strength, Kakarot's tiny face. All of it fueled the fire within him. He knew he was flying toward certain death. But that was the way of the Saiyan, to meet destiny head-on. In orbit, Frieza's fleet shimmered like a metallic storm. Hundreds of ships lined up in perfect formation, their cannons gleaming with power. At the center of it all was Frieza's massive flagship. Silent, cold, and waiting. Bardock could feel his presence, the aura of arrogance and cruelty that defined the tyrant. He didn't need to see Frieza to know he was smiling. Bardock's scouter buzzed. Countless power levels surrounded him, soldiers ready to intercept. But he didn't slow down. He tore through them with the fury of a dying world. One blast, one strike, one roar at a time. It wasn't battle anymore. It was defiance. The entire fleet began to move. The alarms echoed across the void, and still, Bardock pushed forward. In that moment, Bardock stopped being just another Saiyan soldier. He became something more, the spirit of rebellion itself, the embodiment of everything the Saiyans were supposed to stand for. Pride, courage, defiance. And somewhere, deep inside the ship, Frieza finally gave the order. As Bardock reached the edge of the flagship's shadow, he saw it. The blinding sphere of light gathering in Frieza's hand. The death ball. The same light he had seen in his visions. It pulsed with raw destruction, growing brighter until it consumed the darkness of space. Bardock hovered in silence, staring at it, his armor torn and his body bleeding. But his eyes burned with something stronger than fear. Resolve. He raised his hand and gathered every ounce of power he had left. His energy roared through the void, a crimson blaze against the white of Frieza's attack. For a moment, the universe stood still. Two lights colliding across time, one born of hatred, the other of hope. And then the end came. Frieza's laughter echoed through the stars as he released the death ball. It expanded, swallowing everything in its path. Bardock's energy met it head-on, and for an instant, it seemed as if his will alone might stop it. But destiny was unkind. The death ball overpowered him, consuming his light and then striking down toward the planet below. As the explosion spread, Bardock saw one final vision, not of death, but of life. A boy with black hair, standing on a distant world, smiling under a blue sky. His son, Kakarot, the child who would one day avenge his people, who would one day stand before Frieza and finish what his father began. And then everything turned to light. The planet erupted, mountains shattered, oceans vaporized, and the proud race of Saiyans was wiped from existence in an instant. Frieza's laughter faded into silence as the remains of Planet Vegeta scattered into stardust. But Bardock's spirit did not vanish. In that final moment, as his body was consumed by the explosion, his thoughts reached out across time and space. A whisper carried by destiny itself. A father's hope. A warrior's legacy. Somewhere far away on a small planet called Earth, a baby slept peacefully in a pod. The echoes of destruction would never reach him, but deep within his soul, a spark of that same fire burned. The will of Bardock. The spirit of defiance that no tyrant could ever destroy. There comes a moment in every warrior's life when strength alone no longer matters, when even the body gives up, but the will continues to fight. For Bardock, that moment came at the edge of the universe, between the dying light of his world and the endless dark of space. The fall of the Saiyans was written in silence. One moment, Planet Vegeta stood proudly beneath its red skies. The next, it trembled beneath the shadow of Frieza's fleet. While millions of Saiyans went about their lives, unaware, Bardock had already seen the truth unfold in his mind. The visions had shown him the fire, the light, the end. And now, that future was here. The air above the planet shimmered as Frieza's ships aligned like blades ready to strike. In the command chamber of the largest cruiser, Frieza watched through the viewport, his lips curved in amusement. Around him, the Ginyu Force awaited orders, and the hum of power built within the ship's core. He knew what was coming. He had planned it for years. The Saiyans had served their purpose, fierce, useful, and now dangerous. It was time to erase them. Far below, Bardock stood at the edge of the city, looking up at the sky. The stars that once brought him comfort now stared back like the eyes of ghosts. His people still didn't believe. Even now, they trained, argued, and boasted, too blinded by their pride to see the truth hovering above them. Bardock's chest burned with frustration. He had tried to warn them. He had shouted until his voice broke. But no one had listened. He clenched his fists. If his race refused to fight, then he would fight for them. Bardock took to the skies, his energy flaring in a violent red aura that tore through the clouds. His mind was clear now. No more visions, no more doubts. The curse that once haunted him had become his compass. He knew what was coming, and he knew his role within it. He was not here to survive. He was here to make the universe remember. As he ascended, the air grew thinner, and the glow of the fleet intensified. Hundreds of soldiers filled the atmosphere, Frieza's men, cold, efficient killers who had long used Saiyans as their blunt instrument of conquest. Now they were here to finish them. Bardock broke through their ranks like a comet, his fists striking with fury. Energy blasts exploded around him, each one a small echo of the chaos to come. He moved like a storm, raw instinct guiding every motion. For every shot fired, he returned tenfold. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to reach Frieza. The tyrant ship loomed above like a second moon, silent, magnificent, monstrous. Bardock could feel Frieza's presence, that suffocating energy that made the stars seem to flicker. And still, he flew toward it, faster, higher, through waves of enemy fire. Below him, Planet Vegeta's crimson horizon spread wide, a planet filled with warriors too proud to realize they were already ghosts. Bardock's heart ached for them, not because they didn't deserve their fate. Many had earned it, but because they would never know the truth. They would never see that their own strength, their arrogance, had been the seed of their destruction. As he neared the outer edge of the atmosphere, the last wave of soldiers blocked his path. Hundreds of Frieza's elite. They surrounded him like vultures, their scouters buzzing with disbelief at his power level. Bardock hovered in silence, his armor cracked, his face bloodied, his aura flickering like a dying flame. Yet his eyes, those fierce, unyielding eyes, burned brighter than ever. And then he struck. The sky erupted in light. Bardock's energy flared outward, a blazing inferno that swallowed the fleet around him. Ships shattered, soldiers vanished into the fire, and the very air trembled under his power. The red sky turned white, then black, then white again. In that chaos, one lone figure continued upward. A small dot against the infinite dark. And finally, there he was, Frieza, floating above his flagship. The Emperor of the Universe watched the approaching Saiyan with quiet amusement. Around him, his lieutenants whispered nervously, sensing the raw rage burning through space. But Frieza only smiled. He had heard of this warrior, the low-class fighter who dared defy him. How poetic, he thought, that one of the weakest would be the last to resist. Bardock stopped within range, his body trembling from exhaustion, his breathing heavy. Yet in that moment, he felt no fear. He had stared into death for days, seen the destruction of his race 100 times in his visions. He was ready. He raised his arm, gathering every shred of power left in his soul. Energy began to spiral around him, Itaiwai. Wild, unstable, defiant. It glowed red at first, then gold, as if the universe itself was acknowledging his resolve. The light reached Frieza's face, and for a fleeting instant, even the tyrant's grin faded. Bardock roared. The sound wasn't human, or Saiyan, or anything that could be measured. It was pure rebellion, the scream of a race that refused to die in silence. His blast tore through the void, a beam of light cutting straight toward Frieza. Frieza sighed. His tail flicked lazily. He raised a single finger. And with that gesture, history ended. A massive sphere of light formed in Frieza's hand. Pure, unfiltered energy condensed into a miniature sun. The Death Ball. It shimmered with white heat, swirling with cosmic destruction. The soldiers around him backed away in terror, their scouters overloading from the sheer power. Bardock saw it. The same light that had haunted his visions. Now real. Now final. But he didn't stop. He poured everything into his attack. His energy met Frieza's in the vast emptiness of space, the two forces colliding in a blinding explosion. For a heartbeat, Bardock's power seemed to hold. His light pushed against the darkness, refusing to yield. And then, it shattered. The death ball engulfed his attack, swallowed him whole, and hurtled downward toward Planet Vegeta. Bardock's body was consumed by the light, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. In that instant, time seemed to stop. The visions returned, not as torment, but as peace. He saw Kakarot standing tall on a blue world, smiling under a golden sky. He saw Frieza fall at his son's hands. He saw the Saiyan bloodline continue. And he smiled. The death ball struck the planet. For a moment, the universe lit up brighter than a star. The explosion rippled through the cosmos, tearing through space and silence alike. Planet Vegeta disintegrated, its surface melting away in waves of molten fire. Mountains vanished. Oceans turned to vapor. Cities were erased in an instant. The light stretched across the galaxy. And then, silence. The Saiyan race was gone. Only the echoes of their screams remained, fading into the infinite. Frieza watched from his ship, the reflection of the explosion glimmering in his eyes. He laughed softly, satisfied. Another loose end tied. Another race of warriors erased before they could threaten his reign. His fleet turned away, leaving behind only debris and stardust. But somewhere, drifting through the ruins of space, a faint shimmer of energy lingered. A memory refusing to die. Bardock's consciousness, his last thought, carried on through time. It moved beyond the explosion, beyond death, beyond destiny. It whispered across the void, through the folds of space, toward a small planet far away. And there, deep within the forests of Earth, a young boy laughed under the sun. His black hair swayed in the breeze, his innocent eyes filled with wonder. He had no memory of his father, no knowledge of the race that had perished. But within his heart burned a spark, the same unyielding spirit, the same defiance, the same fire that once blazed in the warrior called Bardock. The universe had taken everything from him, his world, his people, his life, but it could not erase his legacy, because Bardock had done what no Saiyan before him ever dared. He had stood against a god and left a mark on eternity. His story did not end in defeat. It ended in purpose. The tyrant would one day fall, not by the hand of armies, but by the will of a single Saiyan, his son. The prophecy had come full circle. Bardock's final vision had not been a curse, but a promise. A promise that the blood of the Saiyans would rise again, not as destroyers, but as protectors. And so, in the silence of space, where his world once burned, The universe itself seemed to remember his name. Bardock, the warrior who saw the end and faced it without fear. The father of a legend. The one who turned prophecy into destiny. The last true Saiyan. Silence. Endless, suffocating silence. In the wake of destruction, there was nothing. No sound, no color, no light. Bardock's body had been consumed by Frieza's massive energy blast, yet somewhere beyond death, his consciousness lingered, floating in a void that seemed neither alive nor dead. Bardock's memories flickered like dying stars. His comrades, his planet, his sun. He should have been gone, erased like the rest of his race, and yet something pulled him deeper, through the fabric of time itself. A distortion, a tear in reality. The light around him shifted from blinding white to golden haze. Then suddenly, air, heat, gravity. The scent of dust and ash filled his lungs as Bardock gasped violently, coughing, collapsing onto solid ground. He was alive, or at least something close to it. When his eyes opened, he found himself lying amidst ruins, jagged stone, cracked soil, a sky burning orange with two suns. This was not Planet Vegeta, nor any world he recognized. It was primitive, old, and eerily quiet. He forced himself to stand, still dazed, and looked around. There were structures, crude yet functional, not of Saiyan design. Then in the distance, movement. Small, green-skinned figures, frightened and trembling, peered at him from behind stone huts. Namekians? He muttered instinctively, but their features were different. Their eyes were wider, their voices softer. They looked more like distant ancestors of that race, perhaps from a time far before his own. It didn't take long for Bardock to realize the truth. Somehow, impossibly, he had been thrown back in time. As he wandered the barren landscape, his memories returned in painful flashes. Frieza, the destruction, the explosion that should have killed him. Whatever had happened during that moment, that blinding burst of energy, had ripped him through a dimensional rift, sparing his life, but throwing him into the distant past. He had no scouter, no ship, no comrades. Only his battered armor and a fading sense of vengeance that burned like a dying flame. Days passed. Bardock survived as he always had, hunting, fighting, adapting. But the quiet of this world began to change. The sky darkened one evening, trembling with the arrival of an unfamiliar power. A ship pierced through the clouds, crashing into the planet with a metallic roar. From it emerged a figure whose presence immediately sent a chill through Bardock's blood. The unmistakable aura of the Cold family. It wasn't Frieza, nor was it King Cold. This one was smaller, rougher, and strangely primitive in appearance, like a predecessor. His name, whispered in fear by the local inhabitants, was Chilled. Bardock stared at him from a distance, fists tightening. The resemblance was undeniable. The same smug arrogance, the same deadly calm. He was an ancestor of Frieza, and in that moment Bardock's fury reignited. He didn't care how far back in time he had been thrown. He didn't care if this world was doomed too. The universe had given him another chance, one more opportunity to face the bloodline responsible for his people's extinction. This time, he would not fall. When Chilled's army began terrorizing the nearby village, Bardock appeared like a phantom from the sky. His aura burned around him, blue and fierce, his body scarred but unyielding. The soldiers rushed him with laughter, firing blasts that shattered the ground. But Bardock moved through them like a storm. Each strike he landed carried the weight of a fallen race. His fists broke armor. His energy tore through flesh. The villagers watched in awe as one Saiyan single-handedly annihilated an entire army. But then Chilled stepped forward. The alien's power spiked instantly, his grin widening. He had never seen a warrior like this one, unafraid, relentless, burning with rage. Bardock charged. Their collision sent shockwaves rippling across the landscape. The fight was brutal and fast, beams of energy carving craters into the earth, bursts of light flashing across the sky. Bardock pushed himself beyond his limits, but Chilled was strong, far stronger than Bardock expected. For a being of this ancient time, blow after blow, Bardock's body weakened. His armor cracked, blood staining his gloves. But the pain meant nothing compared to the fury in his heart. Memories flooded him again. Frieza's smirk, Tora's lifeless body, Jean's gentle voice, his son's sleeping face inside that pod. The sound of his own heartbeat grew louder, faster, merging with the hum of energy gathering inside him. His body trembled, the air around him distorting. Chilled, amused, began charging a final energy blast, confident in his victory. But then, for the first time, he hesitated. The sky shifted color, from orange to gold. Lightning danced across the clouds. The ground cracked beneath Bardock's feet as his aura exploded outward in a blinding flash. His energy, once blue, now burned brilliant gold. His hair, wild and untamed, shimmered with the same golden light. In that instant, Bardock had done the impossible. He had transformed. The legend that would echo across generations. The Super Saiyan had been born. The shockwave from his transformation rippled across the planet, shaking the very air. Chilled, stunned, could only stare in disbelief. The golden warrior before him radiated power beyond comprehension, his eyes cold and merciless. Bardock didn't speak. He didn't need to. His fury roared through every movement, every strike. In a blur of light, he appeared behind Chilled, delivering a crushing blow that sent the alien hurtling across the sky. Chilled tried to retaliate, firing a massive beam of energy. But Bardock caught it in his hand and crushed it, letting the energy dissolve into sparks. Then, with one final surge, Bardock unleashed a blast of pure golden energy that consumed Chilled entirely. The explosion split the sky, blinding even the distant suns. When the light faded, there was nothing left but silence. Chilled's dying words, carried weakly to his crew, spoke of the golden-haired warrior who destroyed him. The tale spread through their surviving descendants, through the Cold family, through King Cold, through Frieza, of a Saiyan whose rage turned him into a monster of light. And thus, unknowingly, Bardock had planted the seed of fear that would one day drive Frieza to exterminate the Saiyan race. As Bardock stood among the ruins, his golden aura slowly faded, returning him to his base form. He looked up at the sky, feeling the calm after the storm. He didn't know if he would ever return to his time, or if this was where his story would end. But deep within, he felt peace. He had faced destiny, rewritten history, and created legend. His body trembled, exhausted, but his heart, that indomitable Saiyan spirit, burned bright. As the winds settled, he whispered into the empty air, not in sorrow, but in pride. Somewhere across time and space, his son would rise. Kakarot would inherit not just his strength, but his will. The will to fight against oppression, to protect the innocent, to challenge the impossible. Bardock's story had begun in blood and vengeance. But it ended in light, the golden light of a Super Saiyan. And though history would forget his name, the universe would remember the legend. Through the vast emptiness of space, a lone Saiyan pod drifted silently, cutting across galaxies like a shooting star. Inside, a baby slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos that had consumed his homeworld. His small tail curled around his leg, his heartbeat steady, his dreams untouched by the screams of dying Saiyans. That child was Kakarot, the son of Bardock and Gene. As the years would pass, he would be known by another name, a name given by kindness, not conquest, a name that would define an entirely new destiny. That name was Goku. The pod descended through the atmosphere of a blue and green world, flames licking its metal shell as it crashed into the mountains of Earth. The explosion echoed across the forest, scattering birds and shaking trees. An old man named Son Gohan discovered the crater soon after. Inside, he found the small, wide-eyed child. He could sense no malice in him, only innocence and curiosity. Despite the boy's strange tale and alien vessel, Gohan took him in without hesitation. The old man named him Goku, raising him as his grandson. At first, Goku was wild, his Saiyan instincts untamed, his strength far beyond human. But one fateful day, an accident changed everything. After falling from a steep cliff and striking his head, the boy's violent nature faded, replaced by warmth and wonder. From that moment, Goku was no longer a warrior born for conquest. He was a child born to discover. And though he never knew it, the courage and heart that guided him came from deep within, an echo of Bardock's defiance, woven into his very soul. Years passed. Goku grew strong and kind. He trained under Master Roshi, fought in tournaments, made friends in Bulma, Krillin, and Yamcha, and faced dangers no ordinary man could survive. Every challenge he met with the same fearless spirit, not because he sought glory, but because something inside him refused to bow before evil. It was that same fire Bardock had shown when he faced Frieza, the same instinct to stand up, even when defeat seemed certain. Though Goku never remembered his father, the essence of Bardock lived on in him, not through memories, but through will. The will to fight for others. When Goku reached adulthood, fate began to reveal the truth of his origin. One day, a strange warrior descended from the sky. Raditz, his long-lost brother. He came not as family, but as an invader. He told Goku what he truly was, a Saiyan sent to conquer Earth as an infant. Raditz spoke of Planet Vegeta, of Frieza, of the Saiyan race, wiped from existence. And though the words stirred confusion and pain in Goku, there was something familiar in the story. The faint whisper of a life erased, of a people betrayed. Raditz tried to convince Goku to join him, to embrace his warrior blood. But Goku refused. He had no interest in domination. His heart belonged to Earth, to his family, and to the people he loved. In that moment, Bardock's wish came true, that his son would live free from tyranny. Goku's defiance of Raditz mirrored Bardock's defiance of Frieza. Father and son, separated by death and time, both stood against destiny. And as Goku sacrificed himself in that battle to save his son, Gohan, from Raditz's grip, the cycle of Bardock's will continued, the willingness to give everything for others. Death was never the end for a Saiyan. Goku trained even in the afterlife, his spirit restless, forever chasing strength not for power, but for purpose. His battles against Vegeta, Nappa, and the resurrected Frieza were not just moments of heroism. They were echoes of Bardock's vengeance. When Goku faced Frieza on planet Namek, the universe seemed to close a circle. The tyrant who had destroyed Bardock's world now faced Bardock's legacy. A son who looked like him, fought like him, but surpassed him in every way. When Frieza mocked the Saiyan race, when he laughed at the memory of their extinction, Goku's calm shattered. The pain that had lived dormant in his bloodline erupted into golden fury. In that moment, the legend Bardock, unknowingly created in the past, became reality. Goku became the Super Saiyan, the same golden aura, the same blazing hair, the same unyielding spirit. All of it flowed from father to son. The transformation that had once been a myth, whispered through generations of Frieza's empire, now stood before him in flesh and rage. As Frieza stared at Goku in horror, perhaps somewhere in the depths of his memory, he remembered that old story. The golden warrior who destroyed his ancestor, chilled. The prophecy had come true. The fear born from Bardock's wrath had come full circle. Goku's victory on Namek was more than a personal triumph. It was the fulfillment of Bardock's final vision, the one he saw moments before his death, when he glimpsed his son facing Frieza. In that instant of destruction, Bardock's spirit had known peace, because he had seen this very moment in Kakarot, standing against the tyrant who ended their race. Though Bardock's name was lost to time, his will was alive in that fight. Every punch Goku threw, every blast of energy he released, carried the fury and pride of the Saiyans who came before him. And when Frieza finally fell, cut apart by the very world he had sought to destroy, it wasn't just Goku's victory. It was Bardock's redemption. As the years passed, Goku continued to protect Earth, unaware of the spiritual bond that guided his path. Each new threat, Cell, Majin Buu, Beerus, Jiren, tested not just his strength, but his heart. And each time, that same quiet resilience surfaced. Bardock's legacy was not in bloodlust or destruction, but in rebellion, in standing against those who claimed control over fate. Goku embodied that perfectly. He laughed in the face of gods, trained with angels, and befriended enemies. He never sought revenge, only growth. Yet deep within, the blood of Bardock ensured that he would never submit to injustice, no matter the odds. Sometimes, during moments of stillness, when Goku looked to the stars after a long battle, something stirred inside him, a strange familiarity with the night sky. He couldn't explain it, but he felt drawn to it, as if someone, somewhere, was watching him with pride. If Bardock's spirit lingered beyond time, perhaps he did watch. He would see that the son he saved had become the man he hoped for, not a conqueror, but a savior, a warrior with the power of a god and the heart of a child. Through Goku, Bardock's will had transcended generations. Through Gohan, it evolved into compassion. Through Goten, it found joy. The bloodline of a rebel had turned into the legacy of heroes. History rarely remembers the ones who light the spark. Bardock's name would never appear in the scrolls of the gods or the records of galactic empires. But every time Goku rose from defeat, every time he smiled at an impossible challenge, every time he extended his hand to an enemy, the universe remembered. The universe remembered the Saiyan who refused to kneel. And though Goku never knew his father's face, his every step was guided by that same defiance, that same unspoken promise whispered through the ages. Never let them break you. Bardock's story had ended in tragedy, but his legacy, his son, turned that tragedy into hope. From a planet destroyed to a family reborn. From a soldier's vengeance to a hero's compassion. From Kakarot, the infant, to Goku, the legend. The spirit of Bardock lived on, burning quietly in every Super Saiyan transformation, every act of courage, every battle fought for love instead of conquest. And somewhere, far beyond the veil of time, Bardock could finally rest, knowing that his rebellion had not been in vain. The story of Bardock did not end with the destruction of Planet Vegeta. Though his body was lost in the inferno unleashed by Frieza's power, his spirit transcended death, carried by time, by memory, and by the bloodline that bore his unyielding will. In the silent reaches of the cosmos, Bardock's essence lived on, bound to a prophecy that would one day shake the universe itself. As the Saiyan race was reduced to ashes, Frieza's empire expanded in cold triumph. The few survivors, scattered warriors, mercenaries, and exiles, had no idea of the man who had dared to rise against the Emperor. Bardock's defiance was buried under fear and rumor, dismissed by history as a fool's rebellion. Yet legends have a way of outliving even the mightiest tyrants. Somewhere, whispered in the dark corners of the galaxy, the tale of a lone Saiyan who challenged a godlike being began to spread, a spark of resistance that refused to die. On distant worlds, ancient watchers and space travelers spoke of an omen that had once disturbed the stars. They said a warrior had seen the future, the end of his kind, and had faced his death not with despair, but with pride. Though the universe forgot his name, fate did not. Time itself seemed to bend around his legacy, shaping a destiny his descendants would one day fulfill. Meanwhile, on Earth, Bardock's bloodline quietly grew stronger. His son, Kakarot, known to all as Goku, lived unaware of the storm that had birthed him. He trained, he fought, he protected, carrying within him the fire of his father's spirit, though he never knew it. Each time Goku defied impossible odds, every time he rose after being beaten down, that same untamed spark, Bardock's spirit, blazed within him. The warrior's courage was alive in the son who unknowingly carried his father's dream. Decades passed. The universe changed. Gods emerged. Dimensions shattered, and the limits of power were rewritten. Yet deep beneath it all, the same legacy pulsed quietly, the soul of a man who refused to kneel. Bardock's sacrifice became more than an act of rebellion. It became the foundation for a new era of Saiyan pride, reborn through Goku, through Vegeta, through every warrior who looked to the stars and felt something ancient calling them forward. There are stories whispered by the Kaio and the Watchers of Time of how Bardock's soul transcended the normal bounds of death. Some say he was flung into the distant past, reborn as a wandering Saiyan who stood against evil in an age before Frieza's rule. Others believe that Bardock became something eternal, a guardian of destiny, watching silently as his lineage shaped the fate of universes. Whether myth or truth, one thing is certain: his spirit never faded. In another thread of existence, within the chaos of time, Bardock stood once more under a foreign sky. His armor was cracked, his body worn, but his heart burned with purpose. He no longer fought for revenge or survival. He fought for meaning. In that moment, Bardock realized something profound. He had not been cursed with visions of the future to suffer. He had been chosen to witness what his sacrifice would create, to see that his defiance would give birth to a hero greater than himself. Goku would not only avenge him, but surpass him in every way imaginable: strength, honor, compassion, and resolve. Even in death, Bardock's consciousness reached across generations. When Goku stood against Frieza on Namek, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The tyrant who had annihilated an entire race now faced the son of the man who had once stood alone against him. Though neither warrior could sense that a connection was formed, a silent echo from the past. Bardock's final roar, his vow of vengeance, rippled through time as Goku transformed into a Super Saiyan. The prophecy fulfilled itself in golden light. In that instant, Bardock's dream was no longer just his. It was the destiny of his bloodline. Centuries later, tales of the Saiyan who saw the future became legend among the gods. Some viewed him as a tragic hero, others as a mere myth. But those who truly understood the nature of destiny knew that Bardock's story was not one of loss. It was one of transcendence. His spirit represented something more than the Saiyan lust for battle. It was the embodiment of evolution, the realization that even the fiercest warrior could rise above his nature, guided not by conquest, but by purpose. As the cosmos moved ever forward, as universes collided and mortals touched the realm of gods, the echo of Bardock's roar could still be felt. It existed in every act of defiance against tyranny, in every warrior who chose pride over fear, in every moment when courage overcame despair. Bardock was no longer just a Saiyan. He had become an idea, the eternal flame of resistance against impossible odds. And though his son would never know the full truth, somewhere in the vastness of creation, Bardock watched. He saw Goku's laughter, his endless drive to grow stronger, not for destruction, but for the joy of challenge. He saw Vegeta reclaim the honor of their fallen race. He saw his grandson, Gohan, blend the Saiyan power with human compassion. In them, Bardock's legacy lived brighter than ever. The curse of extinction had become a gift of rebirth. Time, for beings like Bardock, no longer followed a straight line. It was a river of moments, past, present, and future flowing as one. In every age his story was retold differently. Sometimes he was the tragic warrior who stood alone. Sometimes the father whose sacrifice gave rise to heroes. Sometimes the mythic figure who returned from beyond to set history right. Yet in all versions, the heart of the story remained the same. Bardock was the first Saiyan to truly see, to understand what lay beyond power, beyond war, beyond fate itself. And so the universe remembered him, not as a failure, not as a forgotten soldier, but as the man who looked destiny in the eye and refused to bow. Even now, as the stars continue to burn and fade, somewhere in that endless expanse, a single ember glows, the echo of Bardock's final stand. His legacy, woven through the blood of heroes, will endure as long as courage itself exists. For legends, after all, are not bound by time. They are bound by will. And Bardock's will never die. Long after the explosion that ended Planet Vegeta, the universe kept moving forward, silent, indifferent, and eternal. But within that endless space, Bardock's legacy was not erased. It lingered in the faintest starlight, carried through generations, embodied in every Saiyan who refused to yield. What began as the tragedy of a single warrior became the timeless legend of a spirit too strong to die. Years passed. Empires rose and fell. The Saiyan race, thought long extinct, began to shine again through those who bore its blood. On Earth, Bardock's son Goku continued to grow stronger, surpassing gods and breaking limits no being had ever reached. He never knew his father's face, nor the sacrifice that had made his life possible. Yet, deep within, that same fearless energy pulsed. the same unshakable resolve that once made Bardock stand against Frieza when no one else would. Every time Goku fought for his friends, for Earth, or for the universe, he unconsciously fulfilled Bardock's final wish. The wish that a true Saiyan would rise not as a conqueror, but as a protector. Bardock had fought to change destiny, and though he perished, destiny itself had bent to his will. Even Vegeta, the proud prince of a fallen race, carried Bardock's legacy without realizing it. Though Vegeta once fought only for pride and power, his path eventually mirrored that same transformation, from warrior to guardian, from destroyer to father. Bardock's dream had never been to save himself. It had been to save what Saiyans could become. Through Goku and Vegeta, that dream found form. The gods began to notice. Whis, Beerus, and even the Omni King himself saw something extraordinary in these mortals, who continued to evolve beyond expectation. The Saiyans, once known only for destruction, had become symbols of perseverance, of the infinite potential of life itself. And at the root of it all lay Bardock's spark, the moment when one ordinary Saiyan chose to defy fate. The echoes of Bardock's courage stretched even further than the mortal realm. The Supreme Kai of Time spoke often of a Saiyan who had glimpsed the future and altered the course of history. Some claimed that in hidden timelines, Bardock's spirit lived still, aiding warriors who sought to protect the flow of time. Perhaps it was not just a legend. Perhaps the warrior who once challenged Frieza's empire had transcended existence, watching quietly as his descendants forged the path he had once only dreamed of. For in the vast design of the cosmos, certain souls cannot be erased. They become woven into the very fabric of destiny. Bardock was one of those rare souls. His defiance reshaped what it meant to be a Saiyan. His sacrifice redefined strength. His story, born in tragedy, ended in eternal meaning. There were whispers that in moments when Goku faced overwhelming odds, when defeat seemed inevitable, a faint image would appear in his heart. A warrior standing proud against an impossible foe, armor torn, eyes blazing with defiance. He didn't know who it was, but it filled him with strength every time. It was as if Bardock himself still guided him, not as a ghost, but as a flame burning deep inside. Goku's victories against Frieza, Cell, Majin Buu, and even gods of destruction were not just battles for survival. They were continuations of Bardock's fight, the same war against oppression, fear, and hopelessness. Each time Goku stood up after falling, Bardock's spirit roared through him, proving that a single act of courage can echo through eternity. And though Goku never learned the full truth, others did. The remnants of Frieza's army, the gods who watched the mortal realm, even beings from other universes, spoke the name Bardock with respect and awe. He had become a myth, a story told to young warriors across galaxies. The tale of a Saiyan who defied destiny and changed the course of history with nothing but his will. Legends say that in a far-off dimension, untouched by gods or time, a lone Saiyan walks under an eternal sky. His scouter's gone, his armor faded, but his eyes burn with the same fire. He watches the stars, each one a memory of those he lost, and smiles. For in those stars he can see them all, Gin, Raditz, Kakarot, and the future his death had created. He knows that his sacrifice was not in vain. The universe is alive, thriving, and beautiful, not ruled by fear, but by freedom. That was all he had ever wanted. Bardock was never the strongest Saiyan. He never achieved godly power, nor transformed into a legend in his lifetime. Yet he achieved something greater, he awakened the heart of his race. He showed that destiny is not written in the stars, but forged by those who dare to fight against it. He proved that even the smallest act of resistance, when driven by love and pride, can change the entire universe. As the ages roll on and new heroes rise, Bardock's name endures not as a myth, but as a truth, written in the soul of every warrior who believes in something greater than themselves. His roar, the same roar that once defied Frieza's might, still echoes through time, through battlefields, through generations. It is the sound of a heart that refused to surrender. The story of Bardock is more than the story of one man. It is the story of evolution, of how strength born from anger can become strength born from hope, of how loss can give rise to creation, of how a father's final stand can awaken the universe itself. And so, even as the Dragon Balls scatter across the galaxies and the adventures of Goku and his family continue, Bardock's presence lingers quietly, in the laughter of his descendants, in the calm after every battle, in the fire of every new Saiyan who discovers their true power. In the end, Bardock achieved what no conqueror ever could. He defeated fate itself, and as long as the stars shine, the legacy of the Saiyan spirit, his spirit, will never fade.